What's going on, guys? This is Travesty here, and today I am back for Pokemon Champions. So I had a bit of a break because I was just finding it too hard to get my content ready in time, basically, for the league. So the UCDL season, I kind of bombed out and stopped uploading. We finished, I think, 3-5, 3-6, something like that. So not a great record, but got a couple of wins on the board later in the season. Maybe even 4-5 actually. I think it was a forfeit win. But yeah, so not too bad from that season in the scheme of things. And then we had half of an MGL season as well until I picked up some new work and basically just ran out of time at all to do draft leagues. So took a bit of a break until this came up. So we are doing a PPL season because of the lack of 6v6 in Pokemon Champions. We're actually doing a VGC season, which is super fun. I've been playing a lot of the doubles VGC ladder and finding it really enjoyable. And so I was pretty keen to get into a draft and see how it went. Now, we are in 2 divisions of 12. Nothing is banned except for like certain items like Bright Powder and Quick Claw. And evasion boosting moves, things like that are banned, but no Pokemon are specifically banned. Because we wanted to try and kind of see how everything works and see what things go for. But there was one Pokemon that some people wanted to ban, and that is Mega Floette Eternal, because that thing just hits so hard. And we had the first overall pick, so I was like, well, let's take the thing that everyone wanted to ban, and that is Floette. I have had some success with this thing on the ladder. I will say I think the meta has shifted to counter it pretty well. I'm running into lots of like Mega Aggron, Mega Scizor and stuff that just shut this thing down. But basically, nothing wants to take a Light of Ruin. It's in a reasonable speed tier at 102. If we can get some good speed control around it, then Floette looks like against some teams it will just tear things up. And luckily with this draft we were allowed 2 mega slots, partly because it's VGC, it's bring 6 for the week and then only bring 4 to each battle, and we're doing best of 3. So I can do a dual mega mode pretty easily, bring something that, like Floette, everyone has to bring their steel or their poison type, basically, or their fire type, right? Like, it makes prep a lot easier because I can look at their team and be like, well, they have to bring something for Floette, and then hopefully I can have the rest of my team built around supporting Floette and getting rid of the things that counter it. So that's kind of the idea of this draft. Had the first overall pick and then had to wait 23 picks to be able to take my second overall, and so there are a lot of things I wanted to look at. Talonflame was really high on my list because of Priority Tailwind, which is such great support for Floette, just being able to take KOs early, as well as fire coverage to hit those steel types, and priority flying moves to take out faster threats like potentially a Sneasler, things like that. Unfortunately, Talonflame did go, so I grabbed another form of speed control. Let me just figure out how I can... There we go. It's that button. So the other form of speed control I went for was Dragapult. You'll see the stat spread and the move spread on this one is way less optimized than my Floette, because I haven't used this on ladder yet. And so I'll only train it when I get into a game. But yeah, the advantages of Dragapult's base 142 speed is actually just absurd, and I can throw off things like fast Thunder Waves, or just fast damage, you know, run it with like U-turn or something to try and pivot around and get Floette into a better position. And that ghost type means it can't be faked out. So the most likely form of like speed control I guess people are going to bring against me, I can just counter by not being able to be faked out, and get good damage on the board with Dragapult. This also starts my Dragon Fairy Steel Core, which is really nice, and Dragapult actually gets 2 pretty interesting abilities for doubles. Clear Body means, you know, pretty much everyone drafted an Intimidate Mon, and Clear Body means I can run this thing physical without worrying about Intimidate. Means I can also get my way around like Electro Web and Icy Wind speed control by not letting Dragapult's speed get dropped. So if someone runs something like Scarfed Icy Wind, we'll still outspeed with Dragapult and can take big KOs there. And obviously, people know how Dragapult works. You can run so much bulk in draft because you're just so much faster than a lot of the meta. I will say with the Megas running around, it makes it a little bit less faster than everything, but we're faster than every Mega except Aerodactyl, and then everything else we know the Megas can't be scarfed. So the only other things are like Weather Abusers and like Sneasler and stuff like that we have to worry about. So Dragapult was my second pick, my in my will pick basically, and is a really solid option there. Now bear with me because you can't actually order mons in your boxes in Champions, so I'm just going to flick through until I get to the one that was my next pick. There we go. And that is Volcarona. So you might have seen some spoilers there, but that first wheel, things I needed were speed control and redirection. Mouse hold was on the board, but I thought Volcarona offered a little bit more roll compression, because the problem with mouse hold next to Floette is steel types just aren't threatened, even with like Super Fang. And with the redirection, it allows Floette to set up more easily, but it doesn't necessarily take out other threats. The advantage of Volcarona is it can force burns onto things with the Rage Powder, so the physical threats that threaten Floette have to risk getting burned, which is really nice. We might actually run String Shot, to be honest. That's kind of fire. I hadn't thought about it, but that's a good shout just there. So I get redirection, I do get tailwind, so if I predict them to focus down the Floette and I get my tailwind up, that can be really handy. But Volcarona is also an offensive threat in its own right, and Floette can actually provide support for it in the form of like Pollen Puff and things like that. So there are options here to pivot if I think the team I'm facing Floette doesn't have a good matchup. I can focus on Volcarona using the same type of support that Floette needs in terms of taking down physical threats and getting chip damage on things, and then potentially we just sleep with Volcarona. Then after that, another 23 picks go by, and there's a mon that I've had my eye on since the start of the draft that I decided to take because it gets just the most insane move pool, and that is Gallade. I was tossing up between Gallade and Mega Gallade. I decided to take regular here to leave my options open for other Megas later on if other snipes happened, but then was potentially going to change to Mega in the draft. In the grace period, of draft, but then Mega Gallade ended up getting picked anyway, and I decided to stay with a regular based on what was available. But essentially, there's a few things that Gallade can do. It gives me options into Trick Room. At the moment, my team is super fast. Obviously, Gallade is still base 80, so not the slowest thing around, but it can reverse other teams' Trick Rooms, which is nice. It gets Wide Guard, which a lot of people picked up a Wide Guard mon as like a 1 or a 2 pointer, whereas I think having a good Wide Guard mon makes a huge difference, because even if you don't bring it, you threaten it, right? And so you just force your opponent to think about if they're going to go for spread damage, even if you don't have it on the mon. Same with Trick Room, you can threaten to reverse Trick Room or even imprison it. And then Gallade does pretty good damage in its own right, and the typing really helps with Mega Floette. So the Psychic coverage handles the poison types, and then the fighting coverage handles the steel types. So we don't have a lot for a good fire type at the moment, but that's fine. But yeah, Gallade just offers a lot of options that were really handy into the types of things I was looking like I was going to be facing. And then it has some interesting abilities. Does it show them here? Nope, it just shows Steadfast as the ability. So I can maybe abuse like fake out flinches, but Sharpness is going to really boost up those Psycho Cuts and those Sacred Swords as well. And there is the option to do like a Scarf Justified with beat up from like Dragapult or something if I want to just get Fast Gallade, or even Trick Room Justified, get Fast Gallade going and see how we go from there. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting mon, gives me a lot of options into other teams. And then another support I wanted was more Fake Out, or I guess any Fake Out. At this point I didn't have a Fake Out one on the draft, and so Raichu looked like a really good option. It gets a really interesting move pool with like Fake Out, Feint, Electro Web as speed control as well. Some pretty good offensive moves, just like electric type. Volt Tackle can be nice to just surprise KO something if I need to. Reasonably fast, so faster than Floette and Volcarona, which is nice, so it can provide the speed control before they move. So just some good options here from Raichu. And Lightning Rod, just meaning I can do some redirection stuff without having explicit redirection against certain electric types, which isn't the most important for the team I have at the moment, but will make more sense with the next couple of picks, I promise. So there's definitely some things that Raichu offers that are pretty unique. It's got quite a lot of priority as well, so if I can pick things off, like I said, with Feint, if they're at 1% and they decide to protect, they've broken Sash or something and they're protecting, Feint can let me get around that, which is really, really nice. So that's going to be Raichu. This is known as a good support mon, and pretty happy to pick it up round 5. I thought it was a little bit early, and then a bunch of people said, oh, that was going to be my next pick, and I was like, great, I actually sniped someone else for once. Then the next wheel pick, there are a couple of more things I was looking for, and one of them was Intimidate, and the best Intimidate mon left on the board in my mind was Gyarados. I really wanted Crocodile early. I was looking at getting Talonflame plus Crocodile in the first two, like round 2-3 wheel, but Crocodile ended up going, and then it got dropped and then picked up again, and it was just a mess. I couldn't get Crocodile on team. But Gyarados offers quite a few interesting things here. Offers me Intimidate, offers me strong damage into those fire types that Mega Floette doesn't want to deal with. And again, it's another setup threat in its own right. And so if people are too focused on my special offense and trying to handle Floette and Volcarona, well then Gyarados can just come out and click DD and then start claiming kills. Also super nice to have Gyarados with Raichu in the back, because with Lightning Rod, I'm just simply not threatened by an electric type move. If someone wants to try and run a random Thunderbolt or whatever into Gyarados to try and claim the KO, if I threaten the switch into Raichu, again, it's one of those things I don't even necessarily have to bring it to the match, but if they don't know if it's in the back or not, they're going to have to second guess whether they click it or whether it's just going to be a wasted move. So that's the kind of synergy I was really looking for. Getting those 2 back to back with a whole set of picks in between was really nice. And then the other wheel pick in this round, I was actually looking at getting Liepard, and it got sniped from me because Liepard has such an insanely good move pool with Prankster in this regulation, I guess, so lots of useful things it can do, but decided instead to grab Mega Excadrill. So regular Excadrill had already gone, and there were not a lot of teams that looked like they would take Mega Excadrill, but there were a couple that could, and I figured the other things I wanted were less important than this. So like I said, we have a dual Mega mode now, and the things that counter Floette absolutely hate Excadrill. You go like, especially defensive Steel, Fire, or Poison type is what people are going to bring for Floette, and Excadrill just eats those for breakfast. We don't have to Mega Evolve on the first turn either, so I'm allowed to bring this thing. It just has to be holding the Excadrite or whatever it's called. But I can abuse things like Sandrush Sandstorm if I want to, and I can abuse like the base form, I guess, until I decide to Mega, or I can just, again, pivot, have 2 different modes for a matchup, one with Mega Excadrill claiming lives and one with Mega Floette claiming lives, and kind of see how my opponent wants to play around them. This thing is also super useful. Piercing Drill does actually come into effect in terms of breaking Protect if I want it to. Obviously I have to run high horsepower for that, but again, it can pick off things that have been weakened and are trying to protect in front of it, or I can run basis form with like Mold Breaker or Sandrush. There's just a lot of options that this thing provides, and it also gives me switch-ins to the Steel and Poison type moves that are probably coming Floette's way. So it gives my team like a second mode outside of Floette that people are going to have to worry about. Then, with that in mind, I wanted more Fake Out, and one of the best Fake Out mons, and a kind of a bargain, honestly, left on the team was Kangaskhan. Not Mega Kangaskhan. Mega Kangaskhan was a lot of points, and I figured I actually prefer this thing being in its base form in a lot of matchups, the main reason being scrappy Fake Outs. So Ghost types, you think like Mega Gengar, for example, is really going to threaten Floette with a Sludge Bomb, but if I have Scrappy Fake Out next to it, suddenly they're forced to protect that turn, gives me a chance to potentially get a Calm Mind up and things like that. So again, it's about threatening things, even if I don't necessarily click it, and then if I do click it, then I can get a big hit off into the things that threaten Floette with that Scrappy Fake Out, and then just a pretty good move pool outside of that. Get some interesting coverage moves, because it's a Gen 1 normal type, it just gets like Bolt Beam and random stupid things that I can throw on as tech moves, or I can always just run like Body Slam and try and get Paras on things. So that's kind of the idea behind Kangaskhan there. And then we picked up Zoroark. So Zoroark is again one of those mons that's just going to force people to have to think about what they click. I was really looking at Hisui and Zoroark instead of the Kangaskhan Zoroark combo, but it was just that little bit too expensive, and I really wanted a second Fake Out mon so that I could pivot things around with the Fake Outs constantly going to allow Floette to thrive. Zoroark still provides some utility with the illusion, and then things like Scary Face as speed control, or Taunt and Knock Off and Sucker Punch, like reasonably good move pool. It doesn't explicitly get Icy Wind, which is the main thing that Hisui and Zoroark offered, as well as a slightly better typing. But there are still things on my team that I can disguise as Zoroark that people potentially going to throw other moves into it than what they would normally throw, and then Zoroark can be a bit of a pain just in terms of mind games, and like pretty much everyone forgets about Zoroark partway through a game, right? Like you expect it on the first turn and then you start thinking about too many other things, and so you pivot in Zoroark some other point, and then they're just like, oh shit, this thing's actually Zoroark, and you basically cheese a game win just from having this thing sometimes. And because it's best of 3, that can be super important. Like you cheese the first game and then you don't bring Zoroark the second game and they're constantly thinking about it. You're just kind of like draining your opponent's cognitive load, which is really nice. So that's going to be the Zoroark, lots of fun shenanigans possible there. And then the last one, finishing up my draft, is actually Slurpuff. So there's a couple of things that Slurpuff offers. Alongside Mega Floette, it actually gets the same boost from Fairy Aura, so I can just do like double Fairy spam into a team that really doesn't handle it. Sweet Veil means I can get around Sleep from things like Mega Venu. Obviously there's no Amoonguss in the game at the moment, so there's no Spore running around, which is so nice, but even so, if Sleep Powder's a real problem, Sweet Veil gives me an option into that, but also it gets Unburdened. The Unburdened one that most people are seeing on ladder is Sneasler, obviously, but you can do a lot of the same things with Slurpuff. You can do White Herb if your opponent brings in an Intimidate and get Unburdened, and then we just have crazy fast Slurpuff and some pretty good support moves. So again, like Fake Tears to try and support the Floette. We can go for Play Rough or Flamethrower to try and cover like things that might switch into Floette, like a Spadefmon or Steel types, etc. like that. And it gets some other interesting support moves that I don't want to reveal too much, but that's the idea behind picking up Slurpuff. It was only 3 points, and it gives me some interesting options the opponent has to consider, which I am all for. And yeah, so those are going to be my 10 ones. Sorry, the order was a little bit weird, but week 1 will be going up next Saturday, I think. This is going to be Saturday uploads, but we're also doing Sunday night shenanigans. I actually don't know what the title has been decided yet, but we're doing live streams, so I will leave a link in the description to where those are happening, but I believe it's happening on Gravy's channel potentially, Amber. So there's going to be a live stream of a couple of games of each week with people commentating, some of our friends commentating, and so we're actually going to be playing in the first week's live stream against Amber, so that's going to be super fun. So I hope you guys come along to that. That sounds like it was a real highlight of the Gen 8 draft scene that I missed out on, so I'm really keen to get involved with that. And let's see how draft goes. It's going to be a huge learning curve for a lot of us. So honestly, if I get absolutely wrecked a couple of games, I'm not going to be that surprised. So we're just going to try and learn VGC draft and see how we go from there. And with that, I will see you guys next Saturday. Bye.